all heard something about earmarks during the last election. Sarah Palin notoriously said, "Thanks but no thanks to that bridge to nowhere," and put earmarks back on the map, simultaneously giving them a bad name. California has a shortage of nurses generally. In our area, the problem is particularly bad, but statewide there's a shortage of nurses to staff the hospitals. Our university responded to this problem by creating a nursing program. However, we needed the proper facilities in order to train the nurses. CSU Channel Islands approached Representative Elton Gallegly and asked him to obtain an earmark. $146,000 was appropriated to help fund our nursing simulation laboratory. This is a good example of an earmark responding to a local need.
So that was a typical example of an earmark, but as you can see by this political cartoon, public perceptions of earmarks have been negative at best. So this got us thinking about different factors that may play into a member's earmark request behavior. Firstly, we asked, does seniority matter? The political science literature out there says that yes, it does matter, and that the ability to earmark rests on the power and seniority of the member advocating it. Political scientists like Hibbings and Fenno have argued that senior members are more actively involved in the earmarking process because during their time in Congress they gain valuable experience that teaches them how to appropriate benefits and funds to their districts. Now, critics of earmarks have taken a very different approach to this argument. They suggest that seniority doesn't really matter anymore, and that over the years, junior members have begun requesting more earmarks than they had in previous Congresses. Critics blame this explosion of earmarks due to the increased number of lobbyists on the Hill. Presumably, lobbyists are shortening the learning curve by teaching junior members how to use the appropriations process to their benefit.
But does party matter? The Republican Party has emphasized fiscal prudence in their retort, and in 1994 came into power in the legislature. But some say that Republicans have lost their way and no longer follow their own ideological rhetoric.
Okay, so then from there we formulated our hypotheses. The first one is consistent with the political science literature, that the more years a member of Congress serves, the more earmarks he or she will request. We expect there to be a positive relationship between seniority and the number of earmarks requested. Our second hypothesis is suggested by earmark critics, that the number of earmarks requested by the junior members will increase over time.
In addition, we consider the possibility that there are differences between Republicans and Democrats in the way that they request earmarks. The Republican Party brand claims greater fiscal responsibility, whereas Democrats are seemingly more comfortable promoting the narrow interests of their constituencies.
Okay, so we began our research with our raw data, which were earmark request letters. Typically, legislators will submit a written request asking for support for organizations or projects in their home state or district. In this particular letter here, it came from our local representative, Elton Gallegly. He requested 6 earmarks totaling $17.6 million. Our earmark request came from the archives of a former chairman of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Interior. They were gathered by our faculty mentors, Dr. Frisch and Dr. Kelly, and they come from the fiscal years listed here. We qualified an earmark as any line item that was included in, any line item that was requested by a member and not included in the president's budget. We chose to look at earmark requests as opposed to enacted amounts, and that's what makes our data completely unique, because many political scientists have looked at actual earmarks, and they've done this by accessing interest group websites like Citizens Against Government Waste, and they've looked at their earmark database. But the problem with these interest groups is that they have a vested interest in inflating the number and value of earmarks. So what we've done is completely remove the bias from our data, and by looking at requests, we're drawing back the curtain and revealing the process by which an idea becomes an earmark.
Earmarker is a unique database that was created specifically for this project. We entered the raw data into this web-based application, and the data was later downloaded for analysis. Nearly 10,000 requests have been coded.
this first graph here is just to give you guys a brief overview of the number of earmarks. In 1994, as you can see, there were about 700 requests. That number dropped dramatically to about 100 requests in 1996. The reason for this drop is for the first time in 40 years, the Republicans had control of the House and Senate. And following through with their promise of fiscal responsibility, they requested far fewer earmarks. That number rose a little bit in 1998, but then in 2000 we see it jump up and spike past the Democratic Congress, which is something that we're going to be exploring a little further. Oops. Okay, so the purpose of this graph here is to address our first two hypotheses. The first half of our graph here shows modest support for our seniority hypothesis. As you can see, in 1993, senior members were requesting roughly two earmarks per member, while rookie and sophomore members requested about a third of that amount. We see less of the effect of seniority in these congresses, but then here, this is really where the train jumps the tracks, and we see senior members actually requesting less than junior members. So that's where we find support for our second hypothesis. Clearly, over the course of years, junior members have begun requesting more earmarks than they had in previous Congresses.
These are the per capita earmark requests by party in Congress. Through the 105th Congress, we can see that Democrats were more likely to request an earmark. However, in 1999, 2000, for the fiscal year, the tides changed and Republicans became more likely to request an earmark. This ties back to the previous slide with the coinciding change in party leadership from Gingrich to Hastert as Speaker of the House and DeLay as Majority Leader, using earmarks to improve a member's chances of re-election. Gingrich was the author of the Contract with America, an ideological platform that helped the Republicans take control of the legislature in 1994 and promise fiscal prudence. We expect that these representatives that were first elected in 1994, known as contract babies, would have been a different kind of representative due to their so-called ideological convictions. The data, however, suggests otherwise. And by the third term, they actually surpassed the other Republicans by a small margin in the number of earmarks requested. They were just as concerned with earmarks, perhaps because of electoral vulnerability. Here we see a chart that shows us the Republican members of the House placed into tiers according to the electoral vulnerability, with the Tier 1 members granted the most money, and then Tier 2, Tier 3, and untiered members. When DeLay became Majority Leader, the attitude became one of using earmarks to protect seats in the House. This is an example of a document that clearly shows the top-down, leadership-driven importance placed on earmarks in electoral politics.
Okay, so in conclusion, what we've learned here today is that in the past, seniority used to matter when it came to earmark requests. But over time, junior members have begun getting in on this earmarking process a lot earlier in their careers. And the reason for this is the increased number of lobbyists on the Hill. What is happening here is that lobbyists are really teaching junior members how to get in there and how to bring benefits back to their district. And lastly, we learned that earmarks are less a function of party ideology and much more a function of party leadership and agendas.
Thank you.